I became the villain's stepmother. I didn't really care. I just took the villain with me whenever I went out. That is, until one day, a flood of live comments appeared on my screen. Wait, how is this notorious little terror so calm? The last nanny ran off screaming in terror. LL, who goes on a 5-kilometer casual stroll with no other exhausting activities. The kid looks ready to collapse, ha ha ha. I glanced at the boy, who had sprinted straight to his bed the second we arrived home. I pursed my lips, but before I could say anything, his eyes caught mine. Immediately, he dove under the covers, disappearing completely. My marriage to Corbett was purely contractual, a straightforward exchange of benefits between our families. Feelings didn't factor in. Love doesn't simply appear out of nowhere. The only people knocking on your door are the blind dates your family sets up. After the wedding, Corbett made an excuse about work and left the villa. I nodded briefly in response. Mrs. Davison, the housekeeper, gave me a sympathetic glance. I assumed she pitied me for being trapped in a loveless marriage, and I didn't think much of it. As I sank into the sofa, a small, slender figure at the edge of my vision caught my attention. A boy, around 8 or 9, was leaning against the doorway, observing me with dark, sharp eyes. I knew immediately who he was. Leo, Corbett's son from his first marriage. Gossip magazines had reported that Corbett barely paid him any attention, buried as he was in work. Assuming he was shy, I didn't call him over. I simply offered a small, reassuring smile before closing my eyes again. We would have plenty of time to get acquainted later. That thought hadn't even settled when there was a loud crash. I shot upright. An antique vase in the corner had shattered into countless glittering fragments at Leo's feet. The housekeeper glanced nervously at me, words failing her. "Ma'am, Leo, he..." My brow creased. Everyone, including the boy standing among the debris, seemed to expect me to lose my temper. He slowly met my gaze, a spark of defiance flickering in his eyes. But I did something unexpected. I rose, walked over, and gave the pedestal the vase had been resting on a firm shove. This was just waiting to fall, I told the housekeeper. "Remove this too." The heavy stand thudded against the floor. The boy, bracing for scolding, froze. His eyes widened, his expression caught between surprise and uncertainty. I instinctively wrapped an arm around his small frame and patted his back awkwardly. "It's all right. Don't be scared. Where's your room? I'll take you there, so you can get some sleep." Leo stiffened completely in my arms. Seeing he didn't resist, I held him a little tighter. First time as a stepmother, no clue if I was doing it right. I didn't notice the cascade of emotions passing across his face. First a flush, then paleness, his jaw tightening as he swallowed something he clearly wanted to say. Corbett didn't return home that night. I didn't mind. After tucking Leo in, I went to my own room and slept without a care. The next morning, I woke up well before sunrise, part of my routine to fit in an early workout. After washing up, I hesitated, remembering the way the housekeeper had treated Leo. Corbett was away so often that the staff barely noticed his son. I hadn't planned on bonding with Leo, but he was my stepson now, at least in name. Leaving him unnoticed didn't sit right with me. On impulse, I turned toward his room. The curtains were drawn, leaving the space dim and quiet. I assumed he was still asleep, and was about to leave when I noticed a pair of wide, alert eyes staring back at me. Buried under the covers with only his head visible, Leo looked slightly puzzled that I hadn't been startled. "Oh, you're awake," I said, unaware of his little setup. I patted the lump under the sheets. "Time to get up. Let's work out together." He stared at me blankly for a few seconds, then a spark of interest crossed his face, and he climbed out of bed slowly. The morning air was crisp and refreshing. We jogged a full loop around the gated community, circling the large lake at its center. By the time we finished, I was sweating and breathing hard. I glanced back to see Leo trailing behind, his small frame trying to keep pace. He had the boundless energy of a kid, but the run had clearly tired him out. As he caught up, I reached for his hand and gave it a little swing. "You did amazing," I said with a grin. "Now let's grab some breakfast." Leo's face was still flushed, dark eyes on me as if he wanted to speak, but he remained silent. I was in such a good mood that I even indulged in an extra slice of toast. When Mrs. Davison appeared in the dining room and noticed Leo quietly eating, she stopped mid-step and murmured, "He didn't even throw a single plate today." I barely registered her words, my gaze lingering on Leo as he quietly enjoyed his meal. There was something endearing about a well-behaved child. After breakfast, I decided to take Leo shopping. Kids grow fast. During our jog, I noticed his pants were a little short. Some new clothes seemed like the perfect welcome gift. We browsed a few stores without luck. After lunch, we tried some upscale children's boutiques. I eventually picked out a few outfits and brought them over to Leo, who was waiting on a sofa. The moment he saw me, he sprang to his feet, a defiant expression on his face. "I'm not." "Hold on," I interrupted, holding up a jacket. "Do you like this color?" He blinked, caught off guard, and glanced at the navy jacket. Then he scoffed dismissively.
"No."
Expecting an argument, he looked up at me, but I simply handed the jacket back to the salesperson and smiled at him. "You're right," I said cheerfully. "Your turn to choose." Leo froze, clearly stunned. He went on to pick out a handful of the most ridiculous clothes in the store, each one more hideous than the last. I had no idea how kids could like such outfits, but I decided not to question it. Once I paid, I handed all the shopping bags to him. "Here you go," I said warmly. "Everything you picked out." Leo's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared down at the pile of bags in his hands, completely flabbergasted. I took his stunned silence as a sign of approval and headed to the women's section to pick out a few things for myself. By the time we returned home, night had already fallen. Dinner was ready: fried shrimp, sweet and sour ribs, and stir-fried vegetables. Leo, who had barely touched his lunch, devoured 2 whole bowls of rice. Mrs. Davison looked at him in surprise. "Wow, Leo, you have quite the appetite today." Leo froze at her words, shooting a quick glare in my direction. The tips of his ears, hidden beneath his dark hair, tinged faintly pink. I didn't think much of it. Seeing him eat so heartily, I decided to take him for a walk after dinner to help him digest before sending him off to bed. Over the next few weeks, I brought Leo along on every outing. He was on summer break with nothing planned, and I was enjoying my post-wedding leave. We went to theme parks, the movies, and even a water park. I felt like I was making up for all the experiences I had missed in my own childhood. At first, Leo remained sullen and distant. But over time, I noticed the corners of his mouth twitching into small smiles when he thought no one was looking. Half a month passed this way. One evening, as the last traces of sunset faded, we returned home for dinner. As usual, Leo dashed straight to his room afterward. I didn't think much of it, planning to go for a walk by the lake later. I sat on the sofa for a while before heading to his room to fetch him. As I raised my hand to knock, the world shimmered. Streams of glowing text appeared before my eyes. Wait, how is this notorious little villain so obedient? The last nanny ran off screaming. LOL, who goes on a 5-kilometer casual stroll with nothing else to tire them out. The villain looks about to collapse. What? I whispered. What villain? I pushed open the door. Leo was tucked under the covers, only his eyes visible. I pursed my lips, but before I could speak, he buried himself completely beneath the blanket. I was at a loss for words. In the dim room, a small lump quivered under the covers. Live comments scrolled across the air. Haha, look at the villain's terrified little eyes. Why is he so cute? Villain, don't come near me. Is the female side character doing this just to mess with him? With his vengeful personality, he's going to get back at her? The last comment made my temple throb. Why would I deliberately torment a child? That made no sense. But the comments did offer context. Apparently, we were living in a novel. Leo was the villain, a child who, due to his mother's early death and his father's neglect, grew up neurotic, gloomy, and unstable. As an adult, he would spiral out of control, targeting the protagonists before meeting a tragic end. I didn't have a hero complex. My only motivation for taking Leo with me had been concern that the staff might neglect him. Now, it seemed he didn't just dislike the outings. He might even resent me for them. With that thought, my plan to invite him for a walk vanished. I quietly turned, leaving the room and gently closing the door behind me. The soft click sounded unusually loud in the silence of the night. Under the covers, Leo's ears twitched. When he was sure I was gone, he exhaled a sigh of relief. Then, after a long pause, he peeked out from under the blanket. The room was empty, swallowed by darkness. He sat up abruptly, staring at the door. After a moment, he relaxed. His eyelashes fluttered as he murmured to himself, "She really just left." He let out a deep sigh and lay back down. Well, he thought, he'd see her again tomorrow. I had no idea what Leo was thinking. My leave was ending the next day, and I had to return to work. From what I could tell, Leo was more than capable of handling the household staff on his own. The next morning, I dressed and left the villa, deciding to stay at my city apartment for convenience since my office was far away. Days passed. After several days without seeing me, Leo finally asked Mrs. Davison, "Where did that person go?" Which person, dear? She replied, puzzled. Leo furrowed his brow, struggling to phrase it. The new aunt, Rachel. Mrs. Davison understood at last. Oh, the madam is away on business, she said gently. Where exactly did she go? Leo pressed. I'm not sure. She didn't say. Leo's lips pressed into a thin line. At first, he hadn't cared, enjoying the quiet and freedom. But soon, every little noise outside made him jump, his head snapping toward the door. Each time, he was met with disappointment. He sat on the sofa, picking at the armrest without thinking, eyes constantly flicking to the front door. The peace he'd felt just days before had slowly transformed into a restless, anxious vigilance. When I finally returned to the villa, I was met with utter chaos in the living room. Mrs. Davison rushed to my side, her expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. Ma'am, you're back at last. I nodded, my gaze sweeping over the mess. What happened here? It was dinner time, but food was splattered across the floor, soaking into the expensive carpet. Many of the dishes were my favorites, which made the scene all the more confusing. The live comments offered an explanation. See? No one can handle a villain this temperamental. He was eating fine, then suddenly threw his chopsticks and flipped the table. Terrifying. If I were the side character, I'd run. Both father and son are trouble. I frowned as the comments scrolled. Mrs. Davison glanced at Leo, who was perched on the sofa across the room, and said cautiously, Leo had a rough day, so. I'd seen my fair share of spoiled rich kids. While table flipping wasn't common, it wasn't shocking either. Hearing our voices, Leo, who had been staring at the TV, turned toward me. When our eyes met, his stormy expression froze. After a moment, he sprang to his feet. Mrs. Davison tensed visibly. I remained calm, standing my ground. Knowing his tendencies, I had no intention of intervening. It wasn't my problem. Yet, to my surprise, the boy stopped a few feet from me. He seemed to wrestle with his emotions before finally whispering, Where have you been? Why didn't you take me with you? The anger was gone from his voice, replaced with something almost like a plea. I was speechless. The live comments mirrored my surprise. Wait, what? I thought the villain hated going out with her. Has he been waiting for her all week? That tantrum tonight. He must have missed her. The villain doesn't like his stepmom, right? I looked down at Leo. His shoulders slumped, eyelashes trembling, pale face showing a mixture of confusion and helplessness. His fists were clenched at his sides. My heart softened. I was busy with work, I said gently. It wouldn't have been appropriate to bring you along. It was the truth. My 2-week leave had ended. His small frame relaxed slightly, but he pressed on. Then why didn't you come home? My apartment is closer to the office. Corbett and I had a clear understanding. Our marriage was a formality. Staying elsewhere would not raise questions. Leo fell silent. Just as I thought the moment had passed, he asked, Are we going for a walk now? I blinked, caught off guard. He seemed to take my hesitation as agreement and moved toward the door. When I didn't immediately follow, he glanced back, a hint of awkwardness in his expression. Well, are you coming? I raised an eyebrow and smiled slightly. Sure. Maybe the kid wasn't as bad as the comments suggested. After that night, whenever I prepared to leave the house, Leo's eyes immediately found me, filled with anticipation. I had to hide a smile. Since when had he become more eager for our walks than I was? The villain's kind of a tsundere, isn't he? Don't be fooled. He's just putting on a show. Rachel. Doesn't matter. As long as he's trying, I'm happy, lol. I glanced at the comments, but ignored them. Outside of work, I didn't mind taking him along. Over time, we grew closer. He was quiet, almost introverted. One day at the mall, as we navigated through a crowded aisle, I felt a small tug on my sleeve. I looked down to see him quickly averting his gaze. Just as he began to pull back, I reached down and took his hand. His eyes widened in surprise. I held his hand firmly, walking beside him. Villain or not, he was just a kid at that moment. Leo turned his head away, slightly flustered, but I noticed the corner of his mouth lift into a secret, small smile. Months passed, and our routine became natural. Then one night, I was startled awake by a stifling sensation. As I emerged from deep sleep, I found a pair of dark, intense eyes staring down at me. The air smelled strongly of alcohol. Dim strip lighting cast shadows along the walls, revealing a man leaning over me. It was my husband of convenience, Corbett. Why was he here? Before I could react, his warm breath brushed my neck. What are you doing? I asked, attempting to push him away. Our agreement had been clear. No interference. He was too strong. dark hair brushed against my cheek, warm breath lingering. Half-lidded eyes and a distracted expression made him seem lost in thought. "You're close with Leo," he murmured, voice thick with alcohol. "Does that mean you've forgiven me?" Before I could reply, his lips met mine. The taste of whiskey was overpowering. I shoved him, and he rolled off me. His eyes were now wide open, shock replacing the previous haze. He stared, unreadable. I wasn't afraid. Throwing back the covers, I got out of bed. "If you're staying here, I'll sleep in the guest room." He said nothing. Leaning against the wall in the dark hallway, my heart raced. I wasn't nearly as composed as I had pretended to be. Corbett and I had practically grown up together, running in the same social circles, attending the same schools as teenagers. His handsome face and prestigious family name had never been enough to sway me, but there was a time when we were closer than friends. For my birthday one year, he arranged a dazzling drone light show just for me. When I was studying abroad, he flew across the Atlantic on a whim after a single phone call, just to see me. With memories like that, I started to believe I held a special place in his heart. So what had changed? The summer of my senior year, I returned home to learn he had married a girl named Lily. Friends said she was pregnant. His family, adhering to their strict values, had insisted he do the right thing. Everything we'd shared felt like a one-sided dream. The joy I'd once felt turned bitter, leaving only confusion and heartbreak. I had wanted to confront him, to demand an explanation, but it was pointless. It had already happened. We never saw each other again. I completed my degree and took over my family's business, convinced he was gone from my life forever. Then my company hit a rough patch, and around the same time, Corbett's wife passed away. His family proposed a merger through marriage. By then, my feelings for him had faded. I intended to refuse, but my father, thrilled at the idea of an alliance with Corbett's family, eagerly agreed. I approached Corbett to discuss it. His expression was cold and unreadable. "We'll be married for 2 years, then divorced," he stated flatly. "During that time, we live separate lives." His words didn't shake me. It wouldn't have been any different with someone else. He had never actually confessed feelings for me before. We were simply more than friends. I had no right to feel bitter. "Fine," I replied, nodding. Back in the present, I walked down the dark hallway to the guest room, pushing the tangled memories away. 2 years, I reminded myself. Just 2 years, and then it would all be over. Corbett's presence at the villa made my mood sour. Leo, perceptive as he was, noticed. During our evening walk, he kept glancing at me. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to smooth the irritation from my voice. The lights from neighboring villas shimmered across the dark lake. Leo just shook his head. We completed a full loop in silence. Then, as we headed back, he spoke quietly. "Do you like my dad?" The sudden question made me pause. I looked down, but his head remained bowed, hiding his expression. "Why do you ask?" I countered. I didn't know the details of his father's first marriage, and it wasn't my place to judge. Love or duty, it didn't concern me. Leo looked up, eyes sharp and piercing as if trying to read my thoughts. My face remained neutral. After a moment, he asked again, stubbornly, "I want to know." I sighed, ruffling his hair. "That's grown-up stuff, kiddo. Nothing you need to worry about." Leo froze, startled by the sudden affection. "Hey," I said with a grin. "You look like you've still got energy. How about 2 more laps?" His face fell. Immediately, he spun around and marched back toward the villa. I followed, chuckling softly. The comments were lively as usual. Tables have turned. The side character says one thing, and the villain bolts. Hurrah. Does anyone else think there's something between the side character and the villain's dad? The book barely touched on it. It did. Rachel was originally Corbett's first love, his white moonlight. But he was so consumed by grief over his beloved, late wife that he took her for granted. She eventually left, heartbroken. I let out a short, sharp laugh. Heartbroken? You can only be disappointed by someone you care about, and I had stopped caring long ago. I pushed the comments aside and followed Leo back inside. Corbett was still at the villa. Since that night, his attention toward me seemed to have shifted, becoming more deliberate. His gaze held a confusing mix of longing and a wild, almost reckless joy, as though he had found something precious he feared was lost forever. When we entered, he spoke. "You're back. Have some water." Leo, used to his father's indifference, froze like a wooden statue. I stood behind him, noticing the tension in his small jaw. "Leo?" Corbett asked, brow furrowed at his son's lack of response. At nearly 30, a man running a corporate empire, his voice carried weight even when calm. Leo stiffly moved toward him like a robot. Corbett's gaze, however, slid past him, softening as it landed on me. "Rachel," he said gently, "it must have been difficult these past months." It hadn't. Taking care of Leo felt natural. "It's fine," I replied dismissively, not interested in small talk, and headed straight to my room. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of Corbett tightening his grip on his glass. Life went on. I worked, returned home, and spent time with Leo. Corbett remained busy, and our interactions were rare. 2 years flew by. My family's company stabilized, and it was time for me to leave. Unexpectedly, Corbett's behavior shifted. He started sending flowers to my office and showing up to drive me home. I tried to refuse, but he persisted. To avoid gossip, I had no choice but to accept his rides. His sudden warmth was puzzling. I didn't have the energy to question it. The silence in the car was heavy, thick with unsaid thoughts. Corbett finally broke it. "What do you want for dinner? We can eat out." "Anything's fine. What about Leo?" I asked reflexively. His expression flickered, hands tightening on the wheel. "He's at home," he said casually. "Rachel, about what happened back then, I can—" "Let's not talk about the past," I interrupted. "All right," he muttered, his tone tight. We drove in silence. When he pulled up to a familiar restaurant, I immediately recognized it. It was the place we used to frequent, back when our relationship was complicated. I shot him a glance. Weird. Corbett's supposed to have moved on from his white moonlight. He seems like a good guy. Maybe Rachel should give him a chance. I just want to see Rachel and the little villain hanging out. Corbett's face brightened as he met my eyes. "Do you remember this place? We used to come here all the time." I looked away. "The food's average," I said coolly. "Let's go somewhere else." The light in his eyes dimmed. His breathing grew uneven for a moment before he regained composure. After a pause, he asked, "Is it because of the boy? Are you bothered by him?" I was texting my assistant and didn't respond. Corbett didn't press further. He simply started the car, driving us to another restaurant, his decision made silently. It was late when we returned home. Leo should have been in bed, but as we entered, I spotted him perched on the sofa, fiddling with something, his back to the door. When he noticed us, his face fell at the sight of Corbett and me walking in together. I crossed the room and playfully pinched his cheek. "What are you up to?" He turned his head, voice stiff. "Nothing." "Upset, perhaps?" "I'm starting to rethink the villain. He sat there all evening waiting for her. He hates his dad and this house. There's no way he cares about Rachel. He's just used to the act." That's harsh. It looks like a kid's possessiveness for someone he's grown attached to. I didn't know how to soothe him, so I settled at the other end of the sofa. Leo's cheeks puffed out in a frustrated pout, clearly trying to resist showing his emotions. I fought back a smile. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a small dessert box. "Here, I got this for you." Inside was a tiny apple-shaped cake, cute and unassuming. The moment it landed in his hands, the anger drained from his face. A faint blush crept up his cheeks, but he still tried to act difficult. I waited all evening. "Why weren't you on time for a walk?" I noticed he was still in his walking clothes. It had clearly become a habit. I started to laugh, but it caught in my throat as I watched the joy in his eyes over such a small thing. A sudden, sobering thought hit me. What would happen to him after Corbett and I divorced? The weight of that realization sobered me instantly. My playful mood evaporated. "From now on," I said flatly, "if I'm not here, you can ask Mrs. Davison to go with you." Leo froze. Panic flashed in his eyes. "No, that's not what I meant," he exclaimed, voice rising. I just... The normally gloomy boy was suddenly agitated. I didn't know what to say, so I pulled him into a hug. His soft head rested on my shoulder, and he immediately quieted. "I don't want to go with Mrs. Davison," he mumbled into my shoulder, ears flushed bright red. "Okay," I whispered. Somewhere in the house, Mrs. Davison sneezed. After finally getting Leo to bed, I retreated to my room, expecting a quiet night. Then came frantic knocking. "Ma'am." Mrs. Davison's voice sounded urgent. "What now?" I muttered, opening the door to the sound of a loud crash from downstairs. Mr. Croft suddenly decided Leo must go abroad to study. Leo refuses, and they're having a terrible fight. Could you go down and intervene? My heart skipped. Where had that come from? From the second-floor landing, I could hear them arguing. "I'm not going," Leo's voice rang out. You don't have a choice, Corbett replied calmly, unwavering. The living room was chaos again. The boy who had once been so compliant was now like a cornered animal, facing his father. Shattered glass soaked the carpet at his feet. Corbett, sitting on the sofa, didn't flinch. Arrangements are made. You leave tomorrow, he said. The live comments exploded. This never happened in the book. Why is he sending the villain away? Corbett's supposed to ignore him, not interfere. Something's off it. I descended the stairs slowly. At the sound of my footsteps, both froze. Corbett's gaze held a dark, possessive edge for a split second. Leo, usually bright-eyed around me, quickly looked away, fists clenched. The tension was thick. Everyone waited for me to speak. But I didn't. Corbett and I were divorcing soon. Leo wasn't my child. It's late, I said evenly. Let the boy rest. Corbett hesitated, then relaxed. All right. Leo's head snapped toward me, eyes red-rimmed, expression a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. I could only stand in stunned silence. The villain is genuinely hurt. He finally trusted her, and now this. But honestly, I'd do the same in his place. He's the child of her former rival. Not actively working against him is enough to... I'm on Rachel's side. No one wants a kid moody, gloomy, and prone to tantrums. She's not cruel. She knows she's leaving. Getting him attached would only hurt him more. The comments were frantic. I hadn't intended to stay forever. I didn't need to grow close to Leo. Even though we'd unexpectedly bonded, my decision to leave remained firm. But as I placed my foot on the first step of the staircase, I paused. My hand gripped the railing. Leo is still so young, I said softly. Sending him abroad now, it's too soon. The words hung in the air. Corbett's expression tightened, but as our eyes met, he swallowed and relented. As you wish. I nodded and continued upstairs, sparing no further glance at the red-eyed boy. I asked Corbett for a divorce on a bright, sunny morning. Leo was at school. I placed the papers we'd signed 2 years ago on the coffee table. Sign them. I expected no resistance, but he didn't move. He just stared at me, bloodshot eyes heavy with emotion. Rachel, he said finally, his voice rough. What if I told you I had no choice back then? Could we start over? Every word sounded like it cost him everything to speak. I finally made it back to now. Why couldn't it have been sooner? I frowned, unsure of what he meant, but a sinking feeling settled in my chest. I forced my voice calm. Corbett, we had an agreement. And as for us, that was a long time ago. I looked away. Have your assistant bring me the papers when you've signed. I won't be coming back here. As for Leo, you should handle that. But I can't. His whisper cracked with pain I didn't understand. My heart clenched, but I hardened myself and walked away without looking back. No. Rachel can't just leave. Wait. Corbett's acting strange. Is he's reborn? Is anyone else worried the villain is about to have a meltdown now that she's gone? Corbett dragged his feet on signing the divorce, but I didn't return to the villa. I thought I'd never see Leo again. Then one rainy morning, as I left my apartment for work, I found a small figure curled up on my doorstep. It was Leo, 11 now, taller, on the cusp of adolescence, with limbs that looked almost too long. He was hugging his knees, fast asleep. I crouched down and gently shook his shoulder. His body swayed with emotion. When I touched his forehead, it burned. My heart lurched. Forgetting work entirely, I carried him inside. He stirred, blinking at me, eyes glassy with fever. Mom, he murmured, reaching out blindly. Don't leave me. The word hit like a blow. Mom. I quickly got him some medicine. Here, take this. He obediently swallowed it and let me tuck him in. I grabbed my phone, intending to call Corbett, but my fingers froze. Instead, I texted my assistant that I wouldn't be in today. I sat by the edge of his bed, watching him sleep, his hand still clutching my shirt. Hours passed, my legs numb. When his eyes finally fluttered open, I went to get water, but he tightened his grip. Don't go. I smiled. I'm not going anywhere, just getting you some water. He drank the glass in one go, then paused, clutching it as if wrestling with himself. I told Dad I'd go abroad as long as you don't leave. And maybe you can visit me if you have time. My heart ached. Your father has nothing to do with this, I said softly. His head snapped up, hope lighting his eyes. Then if you divorce Dad, can I come with you? I'll award myself to you. I blinked. Award himself? The live comments were hysterical. The villain is too cute. Awarding himself to her. Rachel. Basically a new get rid of the dad, keep the kid plan. She's winning. I looked at him, fevered but still so earnest. For some reason, I heard myself answer, "Okay." His smile lit up the room, chasing away all shadows. I couldn't help but smile back. Corbett doesn't care about him anyway. I'll take him. I learned which school Leo attended. I dropped him off on my way to work, picked him up afterward, and on weekends, we explored the city together. Life was surprisingly peaceful. I didn't see Corbett for another month. Then, one afternoon, he was waiting outside the school gates. Even in an expensive suit, he looked worn, haunted, his dark hair whipping in the wind. His eyes, heavy with longing and regret, locked onto me. Leo stepped in front of me instinctively, shielding me. He didn't like his father. I approached Corbett slowly. "Stop living in the past. It's time to move on," I said softly. That was all I needed to say. I started to walk past him, but his voice stopped me. "It's not fair to me." My heart stuttered, but I had no words. Fate had been cruel. A small hand slipped into mine. I looked down. Leo's eyes were full of worry. I smiled at him. "We were going to the studio today, right? Let's go." Yeah, the road ahead was still long, but we had to keep moving forward. Corbett's epilogue. He had been reborn. Only after dying in his previous life did Corbett realize he had been a character in a novel, the neglectful father of the villain. He had lost his beloved wife and taken his grief out on his son, even ignoring the girl he had loved since youth, who became his arranged wife. But he had never truly loved Lily. Back in the past, seeing Rachel as his wife brought both joy and terror. Watching her kindness toward Leo sparked a desperate hope. Maybe she didn't care about past events. Perhaps he had a chance to win her heart. He was wrong. Rachel's warmth toward Leo came from duty and compassion. Toward him, she was cold. When he got drunk and tried to approach her, she pushed him away, voice frigid. The 2 years passed in a blur. When she placed the divorce papers in front of him, his hands trembled, unable to lift the pen. After she left, Leo acted out, screaming and breaking things. Corbett, already near a breaking point, finally snapped. "It's your fault," he roared. "If it weren't for you, she wouldn't have left me." The boy froze, eyes brimming with tears he refused to shed. Corbett knew he had gone too far, but the torrent of resentment was unstoppable. If not for Leo, Lily, and this plot, he would have confessed to Rachel the moment she returned. They would have been married, just as he had dreamed countless times. Now it was all ruined. He turned to leave, but the boy's small voice stopped him. "If I go abroad, will she come back?" Corbett's lips curled into a bitter sneer. Maybe. He wanted his son away, he wanted Rachel back, but he knew it was impossible. Then he saw her, smiling, holding Leo's hand. Jealousy, rage, and a spark of hope collided in his chest. But her words, "Stop being trapped in the past," shattered it. He couldn't stop the words from escaping. "It's not fair to me." He had hurt her, yes, but he never wanted to betray her. Her figure receded into the distance, leaving him alone, trapped in the prison of his own making.